Good evening. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and welcome to Right Now. For 195 years, gold and silver has always been the legal tender for money in this country. It has only been the last 53 years that the fiat currency was deployed, rendering the poor poorer and the rich richer. Well, the Constitutional Money Act will make gold and silver legal tender, remove capital gains taxes, and save on transactions fees. Daniel Diaz, the executive director with the Citizens for SoundMoney.org, explains the progress of restoring sane money with me this evening. Following that, Chicago's once famous for its Chicago-style hot dog, Chicago-style deep dish pizza, Maxwell Street Polish Sausage, jazz music, and of course the 1920s gangster, Al Capone, now finds itself with a new brand of famous or infamous. Terry Newsome, a father from Darien, Illinois, who started fighting for the children and fighting against porn and drag queens, eventually got involved in local politics as an elected Republican committeeman trying to make a difference. Well, tonight and today and every day, you can find Terry Newsome on the streets reporting on the massive weaponized human trafficking invasion materializing in his city streets. All this brought to you by our sponsors. Please go to vandersteelhealth.com and get your subscription and promo code for superfoods and many other delicious, healthy options for you and your family that'll help you prep and have food on demand as we weather the storm. But also get yourself healthy. I lost 20 pounds post-COVID using my superfoods, and I have never felt better. It travels beautifully in all the crazy places I go. vandersteelhealth.com. They will email you a promo code, which could save you up to $200 at checkout. And of course, lightsoutbeef.com. That it would be your number one choice for getting freeze-dried, delicious tenderloin or ribeye or other beef cubes. And yes, it rehydrates and it's delicious. And no, these cows are not injected with mRNA. It is a veteran-owned company. And I am thrilled to know the co-founder, Jason Nelson, who I had on recently on my most recent show. Go to lightsoutbeef.com. Also, mypillow.com. How can we forget Mike Lindell? Use your promo code AV at checkout. And now joining us next, after this quick break, Daniel Diaz with Citizens for Sound Money. Let's get sound and sane, folks, because what's happening in D.C. in that district of corruption is nothing more than a dumpster fire. Are you ready to fire BlackRock and Vanguard? Are you ready to fire your cable television service? Are you ready to fire AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, Xfinity? Well, folks, get ready. Q Streaming is here. Go to free7777.myqstreaming.com. Learn how everybody is jumping on board the Q Streaming platform. That's right. You're going to find everybody who's anybody on this platform. In addition to your podcasters, you're going to get all of the mainstream media, which nobody watches anyway. But if you want to check out and see what the chatterheads are saying, you can go to free7777.myqstreaming.com. free7777.myqstreaming.com. Check out the channels they've got. Everything from Cinemax, HBO, Showtime, all your movies that you'll find in Netflix and Amazon and Bing Sling, wherever you go to get your streaming movies, they're all here on Q Streaming. You're also going to find local TV stations. That's right, including all the local CBS, ABC, NBC affiliates nationwide, coast to coast. Everybody, I'm telling you, it's all here for the monthly low price of $59.95. $59.95. Go to free7777.myqestreaming.com and find out what the rave is all about. I can assure you, folks, you're not going to want to miss out. This is where you're going to save money. You're going to fire BlackRock and Vanguard. And yeah, you're going to get a lot more. In fact, you can hang 5 devices off your login from Q Streaming. There's an app on the App Store coming. Don't miss out. Get on over to Q Streaming now. And good evening, everybody. You know, the last time we talked about sound money and gold, we had an executive director from the Citizens for Sound Money joining us, and he will be joining us again tonight because we need an update as to where the country is when it comes to restoring sound money, or sane money, as the title of the show would lead you to believe. Daniel Diaz is the executive director for Citizens for Sound Money, and they've been working diligently across the country for some time now to try and restore true constitutional money. You know, our Constitution says that nothing but gold or silver shall be coined, shall be made for legal tender. No state shall make anything but gold and silver for real money. And frankly, we don't have that right now. We have fake money, fiat currency, and it's frankly, the dollar is really probably more expensive, or less expensive, I should say, than toilet paper. But if you look at the states in which the Citizens for Sound Money has been working diligently for the last over a year and a half, you will see it's quite a list here, including my home state, Florida. It died in committee. We're going to get an update on that. And so joining us now to find out more about where we are with the Citizens for Sound Money and the pursuit to actually restore gold and silver as legal tender across all 50 states is the executive director, Daniel Diaz. Daniel, good to see you again.
Good to be here again, Ann. Thank you so much.
Listen, you know, your website's fantastic. It's keeping everybody up to date, and I want to constantly remind people to go there because currently the US dollar is literally under attack. Western bankers, the international banking cabal led by the Federal Reserve, the Bank of International Settlements, Bank of England, so on and so forth, all the Federal Reserve banks around our country are really criminals because they're private bankers. They're not part of our government. They're a private entity, and they've been allowed to, under a fraudulent, really, we never even had a quorum that late evening when they passed the Federal Reserve Act back in 1913. They've been printing fake money for a long time, and now it doesn't even have gold nor silver backing it up, but we're trying to restore that. Give us a little bit of an update about Citizens for Sound Money, and also what you originally started out and where we are today, and perhaps maybe give us some context as to why we're not as far along as we had hoped we would be at this point.
Absolutely. I'll just give some background about Citizens for Sound Money first for the viewers who have met me for the first time. Citizens for Sound Money was founded on March 15th of 2021 with our founder, former state senator, and the late state senator, Jim Forsyth. He passed away March 15th, and we've taken up his torch to continue the mission of Citizens for Sound Money, which is to advocate for the use and protect people's right to use sound money. So the first 2 years, our organization was basically building a war chest, knowing that at some point we were going to go national. And because of what Kevin Freeman from Economic War Room was doing in Texas with they call it the Transactional Money Act, or Transactional Gold Act, we actually plunged in April of last year to start lobbying and pushing with my contacts in Austin. Since then, we have teamed up with Economic War Room. We've teamed up with the Missouri Freedom Initiative. We've been working with the Sound Money Defense League with JP Cortez on different states that are pushing the gold and silver legislation. And when you add all that together between our organizations, there's 24 states that had some type of Sound Money Act or a version of the Sound Money Act. For example, Missouri is actually the last state in the union that has the entirety or a majority of the Sound Money Act. And what is the Sound Money Act, your listeners might be asking? Well, the Sound Money Act does three things. It makes gold and silver legal tender. It gets rid of all tax liabilities when you purchase or sell gold and silver within the state. It has a state depository. It gives language that the states hold gold and silver within the territorial borders. And the last part, which is what makes gold and silver transactional and functional, is allowing the transfer of gold and silver electronically. Like when we do a wire transfer, ACH for cash, this will allow us to do the same thing for gold and silver. That's the basic framework of what the Sound Money Act does. But Missouri went even further. We worked with Patrick Holland, who's the founder of the Missouri Freedom Initiative, and he took some language from our Florida and New Hampshire and South Carolina bills and added it to his bill. And his bill not only does those three things that I mentioned, it also gets rid of capital gains. It requires the state of Missouri, which right now it's no longer, but originally it required the state of Missouri to at least put 1% of its reserves into gold and silver. His anti-confiscation language, where no entity can come and confiscate gold and silver within the territory of Missouri without due process at the state courts. It also allows employees and employers to pay their employees in gold and silver. It requires the government to receive gold and silver for the payment of taxes and debt. I mean, it is the most comprehensive bill in the country, and thank goodness it's still alive because of the ingenuity and genius of Patrick Holland. Last year they had SB 100. That was the gold and silver bill. It got through the Senate right away. It got all the way to the House floor, and then because of some shenanigans with the Speaker of the House, who was being investigated by the FBI for some contributions for a contract deal, there was some dislike of the Missouri Freedom Initiative because they brought light to this corruption.
Right.
And on the House floor, the Speaker basically killed the bill. I mean, all they needed to do was put it up for a vote, and then Missouri would have been the first state with SB 100 to pass it. So, learning from his situation from last year, he did something very clever, which I plan on doing across the country. He created 5 bills, 2 Senate bills and 3 House bills, gave it to a bunch of different sponsors, all slightly different, with the idea that at some point they were going to combine the bills or some of the bills were going to get through. So before we started recording, I told you there's 3 bills that are still alive. Those bills are HB 1955, SB 835, and SB 735, all in Missouri. And the status of each, they're all different. The one that is furthest along, so that one right there is where, if there's a call to action today for tonight for your listeners, it's to call if you live in the state of Missouri, and only if you live in the state of Missouri. This is what was requested by the legislators that we're working with. Call in to your state senators, and actually, let me see if I can find the exact names. If anything, I'll give you the names later, Ann, and you can maybe put it in the description of who to call with their favors. But there's a list of 3 senators that we need to target because in Missouri, they had a vote this past Thursday, what they call perfected. See on 418, they perfected the bill. That means that means that there's no more amendments that are going to be added on. The next vote is the final vote, and that should be happening this Thursday. This bill, we have we have the word of leadership in the House that if we get this bill through, they're going to streamline it and push it. At least the Speaker of the House is going to push it through to the floor as soon as possible. He told me to my face that he was going to do that. His chief of staff told me that. And I met with the floor leader, Patterson, and I explained why this was important for Citizens for Sound Money. So hopefully, with all the lobbying we've been doing, I've been there for almost a month lobbying. This is our top priority. My organization has, just like Florida was my top priority for the most of the year, Missouri is now our top priority to try to get this passed. So if this gets passed, Missouri is going to have the most comprehensive sound money legislation in the country. And you don't necessarily have to be a Missouri resident to partake and purchase gold and silver and use, let's say, gold backs or legal tender within the state of Missouri.
Okay, so you've also got SB 835, right? Sponsored by Crawford?
Yes, SB 835 was a great move by Senator Eigel. It's a banking bill, but Senator Eigel was able to amend that bill and add most of SB 735 into it. But unfortunately, Chairman O'Donnell from the Financial Institutions Committee stripped the bill of pretty much everything except for getting rid of capital gains tax. I went to Chairman O'Donnell and I let him know that, we have legislators in the House that are going to make amendments. And I told them it's extremely important that we at least, at minimum, bring back the definition of specie legal tender and electronic transfer. I explained to him the importance of making gold and silver legal tender and electronic currency. We went back and forth right before he had to go onto the House floor. And I said, look, I'd love you to support this amendment and reconsider your position on the bill. We're going to leave what he did on there. We're just going to be adding an amendment. So
where did it get left with respect to central bank digital currency? Because I'm looking right here. This act prohibits public entities from accepting any payments using any central bank digital currency as defined in the act. Furthermore, public entities are prohibited from participating in any test of central bank digital currency by any Federal Reserve branch. Is that still in there? We're all good?
Yeah, that is in there. That we're all good there. They actually, and
Good.
I don't know if they combined up other bill, but I went and testified for HB 1955 before they stripped everything out. And there was another bill that was specifically Missouri's going to have similar language, but I think it has more teeth than the anti-CBDC bill we got passed in Florida the year before last, or last year maybe. Um, so Missouri is one of the most freedom-loving states, I've realized, but there's a lot of dysfunction within the legislature. And I've told the legislators this, and they understand. Of all the legislatures I've worked with, they are the most chaotic and most dysfunctional because of all the petty political. They're put it this way: they're putting politics above the people instead of the people above politics almost
Got it.
every single time because they have a supermajority in the House and a majority in the Senate, and it's no longer, hey, we need to unite as Republicans against the Democrats. It's the Freedom Caucus versus the establishment Republicans. And when you have a uni party like that, you have infighting, and there's a lot of political vendettas and a bunch of things going on. So
Got it.
even though the people love freedom, and there's a lot of freedom legislation, there's a lot of infighting, and that's the problem with the country. Of the 24 states, Missouri's the last one, and your listeners might be asking why. And the reason why it isn't that we didn't have a majority of the legislature. If we would have gotten our bill on the House and Senate floor, we'd had 24 states that made gold and silver legal tender. You know what the problem is? Just like it was a problem in Florida, just like it's a problem here in Missouri, New Hampshire, it's always leadership. If it's not the Speaker of the House, it's the Senate President. If it's not the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, it's the chairman of a committee that's taking orders from leadership. So that is the problem with sound money legislation across the country. They're putting politics above the people. And what we need is the grassroots to actually get up and take action. You know,
Right.
it's one thing to point out the problems with our system. That's the one thing to point out the state issues. But we need people to actually pick up the phone and email their legislators and put pressure.
Right.
What they respond to are two things: pressure from the grassroots and money. Unfortunately, the most effective way to get a legislator to move through and vote the way you want is money. But we don't have that right now. We just opened up a super PAC. We're looking to raise money so we can help our friends that are sound money advocates and fight against our enemies who are not. But that's further down the road. Right now, we need grassroots help in Missouri. And if you live in Missouri, pick up that phone, send an email, and let the senators know for SB 735 that you want this bill, and be positive. If you call or send an email angrily, the senators will back off and not support this bill. You want to thank them for all the work they're doing, and that you want them support sound money legislation because it's going to help the state. It's going to help you. And
Right.
so forth.
I just want to remind everybody, Daniel, what you're talking about is critical because when you look at the amount of states where you had bills introduced, legislation filed, then Arizona, shocking, I know, Arizona, that corrupt state, died in committee. Arkansas, bill signed into law, hooray. Florida, died in committee. You've got died in committee, died in committee in Mississippi. You have legislation filed, but it's, things are just moving slowly. Texas, died in committee. These are supposed to be the red states, right? These are supposed to be the ones that seem to be, standing with the Constitution and on the Constitution and defending the Constitution, and they're dying in committee. To your point, this is completely this is children bickering behind closed doors and not working for the people. It's all about their egos, isn't it?
100%. And when you look at that website, it looks like there's a lot of things moving. Unfortunately, we have to put what's going on with the bill, but when it says in committee, on hold, filed legislation, it means it's dead because it's already at the end of the session, or the session is already ended in most of these states. And the ones that have passed, the only ones that have passed are either a state depository being made, which isn't much. It's good that Tennessee and Texas has it, but they don't have legal tender. And or getting rid of sales tax, which is fantastic, or getting rid of capital gains. But these are not practical solutions so that people can put their hard-earned economic energy that they put in dollars right now that loses value instead of putting it in gold that's legal tender. And that's the problem. And what I want the people to know is that it's always leadership that is killing this bill, and
So,
they're not listening to the people.
okay. So, because I do talk a lot about BRICS and the fact that BRICS is moving ahead with their basket of currencies, can
Yeah.
we get a sense of urgency with our audience by giving them some context about what BRICS is doing? They have 95% of the world's population between all the BRICS countries. They have
Yeah.
75% of the world's GDP. Putin is the chairman of BRICS. They have their meeting coming up in, I think it's October, and they're moving ahead with their gold-backed basket of currencies. When they're fully online and they're trading, and they really kind of already are, what does that mean for people here in the United States? What is going to happen to their dollar, and why is what you're doing so important to the survival of our sovereignty as well as our financial health, which means food on the table?
Absolutely. What's happening with BRICS is a response to there's a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And he goes through his career on how they would go into third world countries, influence leaders through corporations, through the World Bank, and so forth. And if they didn't take the deal, they would take further actions to try to force governments to sign contracts with corporations to take all their resources and not give it back to the people, but give those resources and wealth and the loans from the World Bank and the IMF to American companies. The book refers to America as empire, corporate
Yeah.
empire.
Yeah.
And
We're country raiders. We go in and we raid the resources of countries by extending these high interest rate loans because these countries are emerging markets. And instead, what it is, it's a high interest rate loan. The country defaults because they can't pay back. But the quid pro quo is the United States goes in, the government, and raids the resources of that country, whether it's their gold, their silver, their oil, their food, whatever it is. And the people that live in that country that are the rightful heirs to those natural resources are shut out. And they're destitute, and they're left more impoverished than they were before we ever loaned the money. It is such a scam what our government is doing.
it's a travesty.
Yep.
And we're doing a TV show that highlights some of these things that the fiat economy has ruined. But the point of BRICS is these countries that were pillaged by American empire are sick and tired of America. They have
Yeah.
joined forces. They're not using the dollar, and oil is no longer exclusively used with the dollar
Bretton Woods
now.
is dead.
Bretton Woods is dead, and Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, they're starting to accept other currencies. They're doing currency
And they
swaps.
should. They
Yeah,
should. Because what have they gotten from our currency? If we didn't get our central banks in there, we spread bombs of democracy. Literally, we bombed them into democracy and said, you will be part of the central banking system. You will take the dollar as your reserve currency. And Saudi Arabia no longer accepts just the dollar in reserve as for oil. They're taking the Chinese digital yuan, which is backed by gold now.
yeah,
So and the Russians want gold for their oil. This is how they're coming together, and that security arrangement that we used to provide for countries that use the dollar is now null and void because you have countries like Russia backing China for security and vice versa. We no longer have the control over, and that's why you're seeing the need for this war between the United States and the rest of the BRICS countries. Why? Because they need a war to make money. There's no other way to finance this. They've lost. The central
yeah,
banks have effectively lost, but we're the ones that are going to bear the price unless we can get into gold and silver, which is why I always tell people make sure your own physical gold and silver, and not these electronic traded funds. That's fake. That's fiat. It's not
yeah,
real. Get the physical metal and own it. Physically have it in your possession, or at least where you know you can get to it in a moment's notice. And that's your
yes.
real money, right?
Yep, ETFs, paper gold and paper silver is what they call in the stock market. And if you look at how many options or contracts there are, it's like 10 to 1 on how much gold and silver they have. So if everybody decided to redeem that paper, they don't have the gold and silver to back it. It's just a game. It's a derivative.
It's fake.
If you take all the derivatives that exist in the economy, it's like 200 times larger than the American GDP.
Yep.
There's more derivatives and more currency in that than there is on the planet.
Right.
And it's
It's
I don't
more
want to get
fraud.
into it.
It's more fraud. It's more
It's all
fraud.
fraud. It's
So
all fraud.
have physical gold
100%.
and silver. All right, Daniel, quickly, because we got to run here. Give us your outlook for the next 6 months running up to the election. What are we going to see in the gold and silver bills
Okay.
here in the States? What do you think is going to happen?
I think we're gonna get something through Missouri, and I hope it's the whole bill. And then I think, and then my board's probably going to slap me for saying this, I truly do believe that within the next 1 to 2 months, we're going to see a huge economic downturn that's going to make '08 look like a joke. That might be as bad as the Great Depression, because right now there are 400 banks that have over $900 billion in commercial debt that's coming due for either refinancing or need to be paid off, and they don't have the currency to pay it off. There's all that doesn't include the top four banks that have over $600 billion in
And let's just put it in
commercial
context,
losses.
commercial debt, like commercial office space. And we know COVID, everybody went home to work. And now we know we can zoom into work. We don't need to be in an office. There's a ton of see-through office buildings. They're everywhere. Just go downtown in your city and look and see how many people are not populating those office spaces. And that
Yep.
means they're not collecting rent. And we saw this in the 80s when they had too much commercial real estate. They were see-through buildings and the banks went belly up because they weren't
Yep.
getting the mortgages because there were no rent payments to the landlords. Landlords couldn't make the mortgage payments. Banks were overextended in commercial real estate loans and boom, it went.
Yep. 100%. So just put into perspective on how this is going to cause potentially another Great Depression. Commercial loans forfeit. Most of those 400 banks go out of business. Those stocks tank. When those financial stocks tank, the entire stock market's going to tank. Then the residential is going to follow suit because these banks are going out of business. Then what does the Fed do? They print a bunch of currency called quantitative easing to try to save the day and do these bailouts. That's going to create a hyperinflationary event because they're already printing over $1 trillion every 100 days in payments and debt. So it's a house of cards that's about to collapse because we have the stock market that's in a bubble, the real estate market that's in a bubble, and the debt market, which is bonds that are in a bubble, and it's all
And
about to burst at the same time.
and let's not forget Dodd-Frank, right? The Dodd-Frank, remember the '08 collapse brought Dodd-Frank in 2010, and that gives
Yep.
banks and the permission to use your government money, excuse me, for example, your IRA or your
Yep.
401k to bail in, meaning if you have 100,000 or 200,000 saved in your IRA or your 401k sitting in the bank could take that money and bail themselves in. They can take your money to bail themselves in because they're going to be short money in a big, big way.
Right.
So
Because
you may be subject to not being able to access your IRA or 401k except by how much they permit you to take, if at all.
because prior to that, under Clinton, which I think was probably one of the few things he actually did good, he separated brokerage firms from banks, where you had to separate. Merrill Lynch and Bank of America was illegal before, but then
Right.
Dodd-Frank, they brought them together, and now the banks and the financial institutions are one again. And look, they can stop everything. I'm completely unbanked. Except for the little bit of fiat or dollars or currency that I have in my bank accounts to survive on a daily basis with the whole system. But all of my wealth is out of the banks. They can shut down my banks and I'll be fine as long as people accept gold, silver, and Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which we can discuss later. But
Right. Well,
I am
Daniel
completely
Diaz,
unbanked.
it is always a pleasure to see you. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for your tireless efforts. If folks want to support you, I highly recommend they get on over to your website and literally jump into your website. I'm going to take them right there right now because this is where you're going to want to be if you want to keep up with the future of sound money. Go to citizensforsoundmoney.org, citizens number 4 soundmoney.org. And you'll be able to keep up with the states where they are in the process. As you just heard Daniel saying, most of these are already dead. The legislatures are shut down for the summer. But this organization right here is leading the fight and championing the adoption and use of sound money, i.e. gold and silver for legal tender of our money. So please give Daniel. Daniel, where can they follow you on X?
Um, uh, it's my old company name. It's Mining Life. CEO is my personal, or you can do the number 4 Sound Money, number 4 Sound Money for Citizens for Sound Money's Twitter X handle. So it's
Right.
mining life CEO for me personally. Number 4, sound money for Citizens for Sound Money.
Awesome. Daniel Diaz, Executive Director, Citizens for Sound Money. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann.
And now a word from our other sponsor at sat123.com. Don't be without communications, folks. Crisis in communications is critical that you have a plan, a crisis plan for lack of communications. If the power goes out and the cell towers don't work, satellite will always work. It does not require a cell phone or a cell tower or even electricity. You can use solar power backup emergency kits, all found at sat123.com, along with Go Dark bags, your Faraday bags that will keep your electronics safe from any electromagnetic pulse, EMP bombs that might be deployed. Go to sat123.com.
Many of the 36,000 migrants in Chicago moved here to escape violence and crime. Tonight, the I-Team has determined they are now in need of protection here from a despicable criminal element, sex traffickers. Our team has an inside look at SVU migrants, the tactics a Cook County Special Victims Unit is using to help new arrivals avoid being victimized. But for some migrants, it's too late.
There's a power and control component with that. With traffickers, they want to have people who are under their power and control, and they groom them in such a way where they make it seem like the trafficker is the only person that cares.
Cindy Gonzalez is part of the Sheriff's Special Victims Unit, led by survivors of trafficking or domestic abuse.
We are what is called the landing zone, where the migrants are coming in.
She visits Chicago's migrant shelters to warn new arrivals about trafficking, which is the use of force, fraud, or coercion for sex or labor. Hundreds of migrants attending each session.
In these situations with the migrants, they pose a greater vulnerability because they don't know the language, they don't know the laws.
There's a desperate need for money for a myriad of obvious reasons. And so if you were just to look objectively at who would be a perfect group of people to be targeted by the traffickers, it's this population.
Gonzalez tells the I-Team many migrants approach her after the sessions.
And so in those situations, they realize that they have been victims of trafficking, and they do come up to me afterwards and tell me that they have been victimized of such crime, and they just never were able to put a name to the crime of their situation.
Many of these people have already been trafficked before they got here. Many of them already had this happen to them on their way here.
Chicago police arrested this man last month, Wilson Vasquez, charged with sex trafficking 2 women from Venezuela who migrated to Houston and then northwest suburban Elgin. He has pleaded not guilty. According to documents shared with the I-Team, Vasquez arranged for men to come to the hotel where the victims were located and forced to engage in sexual acts in exchange for money. They were not allowed to keep the money.
And you know, what the part that's so disturbing about all this, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that we actually have this going on every single place around our country, every single city. This is going on. Chicago is not immune to what you see happening on this news report. And a gentleman who has been pursuing this like a madman, someone who has just made this his life's mission to eradicate these perverts, not only from society, but specifically trying to protect his own children, is joining me right now. Terry Newsome has been up in Chicago now. You've done a lot of work with Ben Berkwin and others up there, and you are constantly pushing information out to media outlets to make sure that Chicago is not forgotten, despite the fact that your city's government is encouraging the demise of your own city by importing invaders and criminals that intend harm not only to Chicago residents, but specifically to the kids. Terry, it is really good to see you. Thanks for coming by this evening.
Thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So, you know, you have been blowing up my phone, my email, and everybody, and rightfully so. You are really trying to call attention to the demons that have descended upon your city. And frankly, your city is really just sort of welcoming them with open arms. And it is to the detriment of your local community. You have just basically given me a download of a lot of police reports, images, examples of the kind of people that Chicago says is welcome in their city. And they're happy to displace people that might need hotel space and apartments and homeless veterans just for these illegals. And oh, by the way, pay them nicely to be there. As a resident of Chicago, a longtime member of your community, I got to believe you're thoroughly pissed off.
Yeah, and the media doesn't cover it here, right? The politicians lie. The crime is expanding beyond the limits of the city of Chicago. So, for instance, the mall right here by my house, there's been over 60 Venezuelans, organized, coordinated crime, shoplifting. They're being told what items to take, and then they're being sold on the black market, probably through some of the established gang members. There was just 2 weeks ago a Venezuelan couple that was put into some type of housing. They had a 4-year-old child, and the husband stabbed the mother, the wife, in front of the child so many times that she was pretty much decapitated. A Venezuelan in Chicago here. There's been, as you just pointed out, there's sex trafficking, from within the shelters and now out in the suburbs, and it's growing and expanding.
And this is who's coming to your community. This is just another example, a shining example of the types of individuals that are of military age that have been imported into our country, despite the fact we have a Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, that our federal government has ignored, despite the fact that states under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 can deport these horrendous men of military age, fighting military age. Tell me about these pictures, Terry, because you sent me some, and frankly, I don't feel like inviting these people into my home for a dinner.
Yeah, look at this guy thinks it's funny. So the first gentleman's image that you showed, he just got off. This is as soon as he got off the bus from the Mexican border. Man, he's flashing his gang signs. Look at his friend. Looks like he wants to, attack me. His buddy on the left there. And he's flashing his gang signs. This is not innocent asylum seekers. This guy here, I don't believe that's a gang sign. It's probably meaning Venezuela. They're all Venezuelans, right? And it's all so proud of Venezuela, and go back to Venezuela. Why are you here? Right?
Why are they here? What do they intend to do? This looks like somebody you'd want to take and drop off at grandma's house for a high tea. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is the Pilsen Center where Ben and I were at. And these guys, you can't see the license plate. You got this guy on the left was blocking the license plate. I saw him doing a drug deal as I walked by. So I took their picture in the back, and they had this fake license plate, temporary license plate on there, and they got out and confronted Ben and myself.
Who's this guy?
This is Trent Delargua gang sign, right? So I was at the Gage Park Center, tried to get in there. I couldn't get in, had confrontation with some of the handlers. This guy was standing to the left of them smoking weed with a bunch of others. And so when I couldn't get in the front of it, I walked around the back end. This guy followed me because it's a little blurry because I was kind of far away. And then he followed me as I started walking back around the building. He's sitting there flashing his gang signs, so I went up and I confronted him. And then he tried to, he's putting his hand up, like trying to get my phone, keep my phone from filming him. He tried to talk into one phone to do a translation. It wasn't working. He pulled out the other phone, the Vortex phone. I didn't send you that picture. And he's trying to get both. He's got two phones in his hands. This here is at the Pilsen Center. This is another Trent Delargua gang flashing their gang signs out in front of the centers. And
these Pilsen Center, this is a migrant center where they're housing migrants. Do you have any idea how many are living under roof, and how much is Chicago funding this?
Yeah, this was close to 2,000. This is also actually the day I took this picture and you see the police in the background protecting them, right? There was the first measles patient there. You probably heard about it since then, right? With the CDC.
Yeah.
So they had like 60 measles outbreaks, but this was the first day. Then Ben came the next weekend, and I took him back there. There was like 7 or 8 at that time. Then it bounced up. Like you're sitting there thinking, why isn't there signs, right? Measles outbreak, right? And then it's to the schools. Even back then, I'm like, what's going to go to the schools? And sure enough, what did it do? It went to the schools.
It went to the schools.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, these folks are here not for a better way of life. They're not here to contribute to society. Clearly, they seem to be here on a mission, and it's flying in the face of our constitutional rights to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. They apparently know how to have a good time, though, because this happened as you witnessed yourself when you went to attend an art fair, not far from where your daughter and you wanted to attend an art fair. Take a look at this. These are a bunch of individuals without license plates that are identifiable at all on any of their motorized equipment. And it looks like they're having a good time. Talk us through this.
Yes.
What are we seeing, Terry?
These are all everyone's Hispanic. They all spoke Spanish there. They're driving illegal, legal bikes, quad racers, no license plate. They're riding up and down the median, doing donuts in the middle of Ashland Avenue, riding up and down the sidewalks. There's probably about 200 of them. You know, the video goes
They
on.
have a permit for this?
Of course not. And you see, well, there's a license plate there, but almost all of them do not have license plates. And they're all Hispanic. I'm not saying they're all legal. I'm not saying they are all legal. I'm certain that there's a number of illegal immigrants there without driver's license, driving illegally, without insurance, without plates, on the street with vehicles that are not made for the street. They should be arrested. If you know, like I know, we were kids, we had dirt bikes. We were scared to drive down the block on the street with the dirt bike.
So Terry, I mean, it looks like Chicago has gone, fairly much just upside down. Ever since you had Beetlejuice there as the mayor, and she said, if you don't wear your mask, she's going to arrest you and take you to jail. And thank God she's gone, but it looks like you've even gone harder left under your current mayor now. There is seriously zero law and order. I don't see police anywhere. I saw the cops in the background at the migrant facility, basically keeping a watchful eye, protecting them to make sure Terry Newsome didn't get out of control with his cell phone camera and making too many videos and pissing off the illegal invasion army that's growing every single day in your community. Did anybody stand up and do anything, say anything, or is your community just starting to get fearful now and they're avoiding certain areas?
Well, actually, this question is quite timely. So I've been working with Pastor David Lowry from Chicago. It was on Ben's show. It was on Bannon's show, actually, at the church. I was with him and some other African-American leaders. Devin Jones, he opened up the first ever Republican office, South Side Republican office in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, I know Devin.
There's a petition coming out to recall Brandon Johnson. And so we're in the process, actually, today of a coordinated attempt, Chicago, Western Suburbs Safety Coalition, where we're going to coordinate with the folks from the city, the minorities who want to get 58,000 signatures signed, actually by August, before their convention, which would be ideal. And I got all these suburban organizations. I got the chairman of Will County, chairman of Kane County. I talked today. We're going to meet with them in Devin's office and map out the areas where we're going to go and get these petitions signed. Police officers want them out. African-American community wants them out. This is a chance for us, an ideal chance for us to collaborate, right, with these suburban Republicans who've never, worked with, spoke with, met with some of the African-American Democrats who are now voting Trump, right? I don't know if they vote GOP. Actually, in Illinois and Chicago, I don't really care because they're really the same. The GOP here is in most cases they're just a uniparty, right? But they are all supporting Trump. And if our self-interest is to help them, we know what's going on inside the city of Chicago, but it's also spreading outward, right? So we have the same common goal. This guy's responsible for allowing and enabling and funding all this crime that's now spreading out westward. And if we come together as a team and we have people, armies of people that help them capture signatures, we can accomplish a recall.
You know what? Tacticalcivics.com, folks. I talk about Tactical Civics all the time. They're organizing folks all over the country, county by county, and getting the county grand juries basically assembled so that they can do a one strike, like in other words, all 3,143 counties at once go after standing up a county grand jury and investigating and indicting these criminal co-conspirators that live amongst you at the county level that are allowing these types of people into our country and paying them to be there. And they don't seem to have any regard at all, Terry, for whether or not these people are criminals or not. In fact, it seems to me that they're leaning more in the direction of they want the criminals here, and I shudder to think at why. But I want to call attention to some of the, documentation that you sent me through getting FOIAs. And again, this is just an ordinary man like Terry Newsome who filled out a Freedom of Information Act request and pulled up incident reports at the Chicago Police Department. Why don't you walk us through this one? It says this is a BWC recorded incident, event number 09131. Responded to assist a citizen at the above address that the caller stated that a 5-year-old Hispanic little boy was taken by CFD and was transported to Comer Children's Hospital from the migrant shelter. What happened here?
Yeah, and this was out locally in Chicago before Christmas, I believe. I don't think maybe nationally. So this little boy was sick for a number of days. By the time they called Chicago Fire Department to come to the shelter, he was really, really sick, and they noticed some bruising on his legs. And before the parents were allowed to ride in the ambulance, which they weren't, they were searched. They were asked about the bruising on the boy's leg, and I think it says in here something about,
Yep.
the pizza or something, as if they didn't know about it, and they gave him Tylenol. So some of the leftists here are trying to blame, the shelter and giving them better accommodations and all these other things instead of blaming the parents who neglected their own kid. So they wouldn't even let these parents ride in the ambulance because they were worried about the neglect. So they had a ride. They were searched and put in the police squad, and went and met him at the hospital. Unfortunately, the poor boy passed away. And what drove me to reach out for these FOIA requests? I think you have some other one, right? That's pretty interesting. Is that when I went to a couple shelters, and I'd wear my hat. I go in, because I'm half Italian. I look like I'm Hispanic. Hispanic. I got into two of the shelters, two different ones. And what I noticed before I got kicked out, both of them had metal detectors before you walk in. The innocent asylum seekers. Oh, these are 100. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here. These are 100 pages from just one shelter.
Yep.
Of incidences. Look at them. And if you scroll down, there was only 4 arrests. Look at all these different charges. They're not even arresting them. So what is associated with these multiple pages I sent you, the last one has like 4 rows, talks about the arrests. It's a separate attachment.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, this is so unbelievable. It's as if they're just going through the motions, documenting this, but doing absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
You can draw massive conclusions when you compare this to what's happening at the federal level, right? The extortion, crimes against humanity, complete and utter disregard for the tax-paying American citizen for whom those demons in DC that, District of Criminals work for. They don't work for us. They work for their corporate sponsors, and they're all leveraged. I mean, again, I learned today, thanks to, I'll just put it out here because it needs to be out here. Let me just show it in case people missed this in the news today. But now you wonder why we voted for funding Ukraine and Israel, and that Mike Johnson went along with it. Well, there you go. Mike Johnson's controversies involving his sons resurfaced, from monitoring each other's porn usage to arrest of his adopted son on charges of running illegal cannabis business. This guy right there, Mike Johnson, that's him. This is his son. How about it? Right? Another controversy, another day, another 60 billion to Ukraine. Who cares? It's just printed money. Taxpayers only got to pay the interest on it, which is approaching $1 trillion every 100 days, right?
It's crazy.
I don't know, man. At what point do you think Americans just go, you know what? Screw those guys in DC. I will not comply.
I hope it comes sooner than later, because the clock's ticking, right? I mean, for us, for Illinois, it's like beyond the point of no return. We still got to fight, right? We still have to do this. It's for our children.
You're a freaking hero as far as I'm concerned. The fact you're still up there and you've dug in your heels in the trenches up there in that freaking clown show of a town you have with your stupid government. It's a testament to who you are, Terry. You are truly behind enemy lines. By the way, that's your podcast. Give us a plug for that, please.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the best way you could follow, if you go to Twitter at Terry Newsome 357, TerryNewsome 357. Then I got the link tree there, but we post everything there. We're covering lots of national stories, especially the stuff here. There's so much craziness going on in Chicago. I mean, hopefully you guys can see it, and please, share it and let people know what's going on and how bad it is in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, man. How much longer are you going to stick it out? Are you going to just stay there till it's finally cleaned up?
My children are I have twins. They're juniors in high school. Once they go to college, we want out of here, but I'm going to keep fighting. And you know what, even like, I guess you're calling us, retreating, right? The enemy is going to keep expanding. So people have to fight. They have to stand up. We owe it to our children. They're not going to experience anything that we had, nothing, not even close to the same, the freedoms and, Now we got these illegals that are all over America, right? Everywhere.
Yeah.
They're going to be getting support from outside influences, right? From special
Yeah.
forces. I know it sounds crazy, but from China or Iraq, Afghanistan, or where not, Iran, and they're going to coordinate them. And then these people are going to be working with the gangs. And there's probably going to be some people that really came here for a better life, right? I'm not saying that, but some of them are going to be forced into a situation where they're not making the money once the money dries up from the taxpayers, and they're going to go out and get aligned with criminals to make it survive. They're going to not have a choice, and things are going to get really crazy this summer, really crazy.
Well, everybody's been warned about this summer, and you know, we're just we're rolling into the end of April. May's around the corner. Hurricane season starts here June 1st. Can't wait for that. I can only imagine the amount of cloud seeding that's going to, you know, start as soon as they can get the green light on that. Because, you know, these demons, they're losing the central bank war. They're losing the war against BRICS. BRICS is cleaning our clocks, and the dollar is going to be better used as toilet paper than it is for anything else in the very near future. But in the meantime, they intend to create war, civil unrest, and they're doing it beautifully because they're orchestrating and executing on their plan, which is, of course, destroying the cities. And as a parting gift, I just want to give everybody a quick sneak peek on what it looks like from a maps perspective. And now, granted, this is going back to 2022, but this is the United States' top immigrant destinations. And right here, that would be you, Terry, up there in Chicago. And they're looking back in 2022, 1.7 million illegals in your city that have been, you know, brought there. Florida is not looking good. We got 350,000 dumped, but you know, and still climbing. But we've got 4.8 million. So in Miami has about 2.5 million. But you guys, scary. What's going on up there?
Yeah, you know what's concerning is that, you know, we're in a war. Most people don't know we're in a war, and we're losing it badly right now as we sit here today.
Yeah,
And they got to get involved. They owe it to their children. They owe it to the country. They owe it to the men and women who died for our country. And we're in the most dangerous war in the history of our country. And people are so stupid or lazy, disconnected, or, you know, worried about their, you know, nobody wants to lose their job or, you know, get doxxed and all that stuff. But you know what? Our children are not going to have the opportunity to have the freedom that we have unless people like yourself and others.
that's right. It's our civic duty. I mean, this is our 1776 moment. This is what our great grandfathers and mothers and so on fought for, and we're just giving it away. Terry Newsome, always good to see you. Thank you so much for making time to share with what's going on in your corner of the world, because it's going to be endemic everywhere. The big cities are going to be lit this summer, and as you said, it's going to be a long, hot summer. It's going to be ugly, in fact. So keep your head down, head on a swivel, but keep reporting what's going on. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
There is no law, and to date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
But We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education put a full-page ad in the USA Today on July 7th, 2000. And within the body of that ad was a $50,000 challenge for anyone that could show the law. And to me, $50,000 is a lot of money. So I went after that and did the research based on the fact that I thought, let's put this baby to bed. I'm hearing all these rumors. You know, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'll answer these people's questions that are asking me, and then I'll win this $50,000. And, you know, based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress. We've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
There is no law. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct, unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
I really expected that, of course, there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code, that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. Maybe I don't know what it is right then as he was speaking to me, but sure. So naively, I agreed to go off and research it and get back to him. 3.5 months later, I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know. And I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
I had to leave the IRS because I presented evidence that I had accumulated indicating that the agency was violating the law and violating people's rights. And I asked the agency for a response to my sincere concerns. And the answer I got was that they would not respond to my concerns and that they would provide me with the paperwork necessary to tender my resignation.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
American citizens, along with the foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in our country.
At the national level, when people would attempt to contact somebody of a much higher authority, say the commissioner, same kind of thing. They would get answers that were in effect non-answers.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care. If we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. People have been told, that you need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, my question is, well, if that's true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913?
The main purpose of the income tax is not to raise revenue, but to redistribute wealth and to control society.
A lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways? If there's no money coming into the government, we need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction.
I believe that in both spirit and substance, our tax system has come to be un-American. Death and taxes may be inevitable, but unjust taxes are not.
This small booklet includes the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. This is a document that every citizen should read. It's a document which freed an entire nation. This is the Internal Revenue Code, and this document and the unlawful application of this document by the Internal Revenue Service has enslaved the nation that this document attempted to free.
And thanks as always for tuning in. I hope you are heeding the advice when it comes to gold and silver. And if you have anything you'd like to contribute, please reach me at Ann@AnnVandersteel.com. I look forward to getting your emails. Good night, everybody.